Let's come back to local news and talk about land. The Ad Hoc Committee on Legislating Amending Section 25 of the Constitution to allow the expropriation of land without compensation is one step closer to finalising its work. Today, the committee received inputs from the Public Works Minister, Patricia de Lille, the Energy Minister, Gwede Mantashe, and Justice Minister Ronald Lamola. These were the last inputs on the matter after the committee conducted public hearings throughout the country. The committee chairperson, Mathole Motshekga, says they will adopt their report next week. To discuss, we're joined by Professor of Law from Northwest University, that's Professor Elmien Du Plessis. Prof, thank you for being with us. So public comments, now the report being compiled. Just if you can start by telling us where we are in this process as a country, because there's no doubt that we are moving towards this legal change.
Yes, so where we are is the period for written comments actually closed last year in February, and we were meant to go through a period of oral submissions from March, also oral submissions in Parliament, and that was put on hold because of COVID. And last year the committee didn't do that much work until the end of the year when they decided on the new plan ahead. Then there were meetings in the provinces where the committee, if you remember correctly, they split up in two. They went to the provinces to hear what people have to say about the wording. We are now dealing with the specific wording of the amendment to Section 25. We are no longer asking the question whether the Constitution should be amended or not. That was part of the Constitutional Review Committee process. And then what happened the past 2-3 weeks was basically Parliament, the Portfolio Committee then, or the Ad Hoc Committee, listening to these oral submissions in Parliament via Zoom, of course, because of COVID. But what they have also found that was in many of these oral submissions made by organizations such as lawyers, the Legal Resources Centre, etc., there were comments made about the difficulty in land reform and how the conversation might be a little bit misplaced. And to get more information on that, they invited certain departments like the Department of Public Works, that's responsible for the expropriation bill, the Department of Agriculture, Rural Development and Land Reform, of course, who are very crucial to this land reform conversation, and then the Minister of Minerals and the Minister of Justice to come and talk to them about the challenges that they face and the plans that they have in place to address these challenges. So that was happening the past 2-3 sessions. They also had a presentation by the Constitutional Law Office of the Parliament to tell them about the limits of their mandate and what they need to do if they want to extend the mandate and the limits that the law plays on them or might place on them. So what they now need to do is they now need to take all these submissions, the written submissions, the oral submissions, the submissions made in provincial level, the submissions made by the departments, and they now have to come up with a wording for the amendment of Section 25. So the report that they are talking about adopting is just a report that put together all the inputs that was given in the public participation process to say this is what the public said they wanted and this is how we are going to fulfill our mandate as an ad hoc committee.
Tell us about Minister Patricia de Lille's evidence. Apparently that was quite technical. Does the legal amendment come? When does the report come? Can you explain that issue?
Yes, so one of the problems and one of the issues that kept on coming up in these public hearings was we are also busy with the process, and it is quite confusing. So we are busy with the process of adopting an expropriation bill. And this bill has been coming since 2008. And then 2013, the bill was, we tried again for a bill. It's more or less the same form that it is now with some amendments here and there. So this bill has been coming for quite a long time because we need specific legislation for expropriation that is in line with the Constitution. But now, due to the events just unfolding the way it did, this process of adopting the expropriation bill runs alongside the process of amending Section 25. So a lot of the committee members said, but you cannot adopt an expropriation bill before you have not completed the amendment of Section 25 because the bill needs to be in line with the Constitution. And if you don't know what the wording of the Constitution is like, you cannot adopt the bill. And what Minister de Lille says, and I agree with that point of view, is that, you know, the mandate of this ad hoc committee is to make explicit what is implicit in the Constitution. It's not a change in the legal position as such. It's just making clearer what's in the Constitution. So that's not really changing the legal position, which means that the bill, if it is in line with Section 25 as it stands now, should also be in line with the amendment.
All right, so what you're saying is that it's much more complicated than just saying in the Constitution all of a sudden land expropriation is allowed. There are a lot of legal issues that have to be ironed out first, basically.
And I think it's also, one should listen to what Minister de Lille said at the end. She said also in line with the presidential panel report, is that expropriation is just a method for the state to acquire the land. And it's one of several methods. Land can be donated, land can be purchased. So it's one of several measures, but it doesn't tell us what must happen to the land afterwards. For that, we need a comprehensive redistribution act that we don't have. Currently, the redistribution happens in terms of policy. It's also not always clear in terms of what policy. So, you know, once we have an amendment to the Constitution, it will not mean that the state can now just go around and take any property for no valid reason and just give it to somebody, because it needs more legislation to determine what happens to the land after the state acquired the property, and it must be for a valid public purpose. So the state cannot just take it away for any purpose. There must be, I want to say, method in the madness. So I think the conversation, on the one hand, it gives people too much hope, and it's not the expectations might not be managed well, and on the other hand, it creates a lot of fear, which I think, while I understand that people are scared, I think the bill does not go that far, or the amendment will not go that far.
Well, Professor, let's end there, because this is an emotional issue and there are people on both sides. Yes. The President himself, government, quite clearly worried about investors, and he has said that this will be fair, there'll be parameters that everyone understands. But for a long time, those parameters haven't been clear. There's been a lot of uncertainty. Are those starting to emerge? Under what conditions land could be expropriated?
Yes, so the expropriation bill in clause 12.3, already at the end of 2019, they inserted clause 12.3 to say, listen, this is the kind of property that we envision might be expropriated at nil rand compensation. I also don't want to use the word without compensation, because that's something totally different. So at nil rand compensation, which means that the state must still justify why that specific property is just and equitable to expropriate at nil compensation. And that included property that's not used, or where the buildings, for instance, or the land is unsafe, where it's just there for speculative purposes and no other reason. So, I mean, we do need a little bit more clarity on those instances, but I think what the state tried to do by inserting clause 12.3 is to signal we are not going to look at your urban house, for instance. I know a lot of people are scared about that. We are not going to look at big productive farms to take that away and to jeopardize food security. We really want to look at how land can be utilized best, and also we do need to address the dispossession that happened, and to do it in a fair manner. So I think it's all these things that one needs to take into account, and all these interests that we need to balance, which is quite tricky. But I do see the things that I see coming out from the Department of Agriculture, the plans that they have for the next, the short term, the medium term, and the long term. They seem to be making the right noise. For now, it's just to make sure that they do live up to the promises, and when we do have proper legislation, that it is implemented in a way that's fair and that does not lead to the abuse of power, etc.
All right. Thank you for making a hard issue for many of us so much clearer. That was a Professor of Law from the Northwest University, Prof Elmien Du Plessis. Now, frustrated residents